In 1952, a Hudson Hornet won 40 of 52 NASCAR races. 10,000 workers built those cars on East Jefferson Avenue in Detroit. 2 years later, the Detroit factory was finished. The brand survived on paper until 1956, rebadged on a Nash chassis in a Wisconsin plant that had never built a genuine Hudson. The company formed to save Hudson erased it instead. Welcome inside the silent Hudson factory. In 1909, 8 men pooled $90,000 in Detroit and formed Hudson Motor Car Company. The lead investor was Joseph Lothian Hudson, whose department store was already the most recognizable retail name in the city. The man they hired to build the cars was Roy Dyckman Chapin, who had already made his reputation in 1901 by driving an Oldsmobile curved dash runabout from Detroit to New York City, arriving caked in road dust, proving that automobiles could be trusted to perform across distance. That belief, that a car earns its place by actually working, became the founding standard of Hudson. It would define the company's greatest years and make the eventual erasure of its engineering all the more specific, a loss. The first Hudson sold for $1,850. In year one, the company moved 4,556 vehicles, the largest first-year sales figure in American automotive history at that point. The market did not need to be convinced. It was waiting. The Hudson built credibility through the 1930s and 40s. The decision that turned credibility into dominance came in 1948, when Hudson engineers introduced the step-down body. Every other American car of that era placed the passenger compartment floor on top of the frame rails. Hudson's engineers dropped the floor between the rails instead, seating passengers inside the frame rather than above it. The center of gravity dropped with it. The result was a car that held the road in corners, in wet conditions, at speed, in ways that no domestic competitor could match. Engineers at Ford and Chrysler understood exactly what Hudson had done. Matching it would require retooling their entire body programs. Between 1951 and 1954, that engineering advantage translated directly onto the racetrack. Herb Thomas won the NASCAR championship in 1951 and 1953 in a Hornet. Marshall Teague and Dick Rathman added more wins. The twin H-power dual carburetor engine option gave drivers a legal factory performance edge that no other manufacturer was offering. 40 wins in 1952 alone. Hudson was not competing with the Big Three. It was outrunning them. On Jefferson Avenue, the plant ran 3 shifts. Over 10,000 workers built Hornets and Wasps and jet models, and the workers knew the product they were building was something engineers at competing companies wanted to understand. That specific knowledge, that daily evidence of quality, was the currency of the factory floor. The question that the step-down era opened was whether the financial structure underneath all of it could hold. In 1952, General Motors sold over 1.5 million cars. Hudson sold approximately 70,000. At 70,000 units a year, every component Hudson purchased cost more per unit than the same component cost General Motors. Tooling investments were spread across a fraction of the volume. Research and development per vehicle multiplied accordingly. Hudson's engineers had solved the handling problem more elegantly than their competitors. They could not solve the purchasing problem. Scale was the one variable that engineering could not offset. The step-down body, revolutionary in 1948, needed a replacement by the mid-1950s. When a new body program cost millions, Hudson's capital reserves could not fund it independently. The company was profitable in peak years, but had no margin for a development cycle of that size. Nash Kelvinator was in the same position. Its president, George Mason, had been studying the problem across all the American independents and had reached a conclusion. Hudson, Nash, Packard, and Studebaker needed to consolidate into a single entity large enough to compete on something approaching equal terms with the Big Three. Mason's analysis of the problem was correct. His plan was larger than what he would live to execute. In January of 1954, Hudson and Nash Kelvinator announced the formation of American Motors Corporation. Mason would lead it. Both brands, both factories, and both engineering teams would continue. That was the public position. George Mason died in October of 1954. He was 57 years old, 7 months into the company he had designed. The man who replaced him was George Romney. Romney examined the combined operation and saw a cost structure that the merged volume still could not sustain. 2 factories, 2 engineering teams, 2 sets of tooling. His answer was consolidation, and his consolidation had a direction. The Nash plant in Kenosha, Wisconsin, would become the primary facility. The Detroit operation would contract. The 1955 Hudson was built in Kenosha on a Nash Statesman platform. The step-down body was gone. The twin H-power engine option was gone. What remained was a Nash with Hudson badging and a Hudson price. Automotive press of the era coined the term Packard-Baker for what was happening simultaneously to Packard under the same consolidation logic. The name survives, the substance does not. The Detroit workers who had built the step-down cars did not relocate to Kenosha. They were left on Jefferson Avenue as production contracted. The specific knowledge of how to build a Hudson, developed across years on a specific factory floor, had no place in Romney's restructured company. It was not transferred. It was ended. The last genuine Hudson, built on a genuine Hudson platform in the genuine Hudson factory, left the Jefferson Avenue line in the spring of 1954. The workers who built it did not know it was the last one. Hudson buyers who had chosen the step-down Hornet for documented race-proven reasons had no basis for choosing its Kenosha replacement. Sales of the rebadged Hudson fell sharply through 1955 and 1956. By the end of 1956, American Motors retired the Hudson name entirely. No announcement, no ceremony. The 1957 lineup carried no Hudson. 45 years of production, 4,556 cars in year 1, 40 wins in 1952, ended with a nameplate removal. American Motors continued without Hudson, finding a brief competitive window with the Rambler Compact in the late 1950s, before Chrysler acquired the company in 1987. That arc belongs to a different story. The Hudson story ended in the spring of 1954, when the last real one came off the line. The Jefferson Avenue plant site is largely cleared today. Where 10,000 workers ran 3 shifts building cars that outran the competition, there is nothing left that names what happened. The Hudson name exists in collector garages and in the records of the Hudson-Essex Terraplane Historical Society. The Hornet nameplate was briefly revived by Dodge as a concept vehicle in 2006. It went nowhere. A name applied to a different car is not a revival. It is a reference. If this is the kind of history you think deserves to be told with specific numbers and specific decisions, subscribe. More stories like this one are coming. The subscribe button is right there. The standard reading of Hudson is a scale story. Independent automaker cannot survive against the big 3. Scale was inevitable, and the ending was foregone. That reading is incomplete in a specific way that matters. Hudson's merger with Nash did not fail to save Hudson because the strategy was wrong. It failed because the decision made inside the strategy to build the combined company on the Nash platform in the Nash factory under Nash management eliminated the specific thing that made Hudson worth saving. Romney was not wrong that the cost structure needed to change. He was wrong about what the cost structure was protecting. The step-down engineering in the Detroit factory were not redundancies. They were the product. Eliminating them to reduce costs was not rationalization. It was the ending, described as a business decision. The second lesson is narrower and harder. 40 wins in a single NASCAR season did not save Hudson. The performance record that no other American manufacturer could match in 1952 had no weight in the boardroom conversations of 1953 and 1954. Engineering excellence does not convert to financial resilience when volume is insufficient. A superior product at 70,000 units a year loses to an adequate product at 1.5 million. Hudson is the clearest example of this in American automotive history, precisely because the quality gap was so documentable, and the outcome was the same regardless. The third lesson belongs to the workers on Jefferson Avenue. They did not lose their jobs because the cars they built were inadequate. The race record alone disproves that. They lost their jobs because a merger's internal consolidation logic identified their factory as the redundant facility, and the workers' accumulated expertise, their specific knowledge of how to build a Hudson, carried no weight against the geography of which plant Romney chose to keep. The people who built the best product paid the cost of a financial decision they had no role in making. That pattern is not unique to Hudson. It runs through the archive this channel's building, story by story. Hudson Motor Car Company ran from 1909 to 1954. It produced nearly 4 million vehicles. It gave Detroit 10,000 jobs at its peak. It built the car that won 40 races in a single season against competition that could not match its engineering. It ended not because it failed. It ended because a meeting decided it would. If you know someone whose family worked the Detroit auto plants in the 1950s, share this with them. These stories belong to the people who lived inside them. One question for the comments before you go. George Mason had the right diagnosis but died before he could execute his plan. If Mason had lived to run American Motors through the consolidation, do you think Hudson survives as a genuine brand? Leave your answer below. Subscribe for more. Every video on this channel covers a company that built something real, a decision that ended it, and the workers who paid the cost.